Welcome to the Thriving Marriage Podcast. My wonderful wife, Jennifer, is with me today. We are actually continuing a topic from, it's now, I think, a couple weeks ago. We had left you off with basically a bunch of reasons why your partner might not be working on the marriage with you. And then we said, we'll have some solutions here. And then we waited a couple weeks. But here we are. We are going to be talking about emotional reasons that may be preventing your spouse from working with you, and also those solutions.
Right. I mean, because it's important to know all like the thoughts behind why, so that you can be, have clear conversations, perhaps.
Yeah. So we are going to be talking about some of those problems, but if you stick around, then we will actually talk to you about something to do about these sort of situations. But before we get to that, we are actually going to discuss a client win of the week. This one is coming to us from Matt. So Matt is wanting to say, he shared, I want to share my biggest win of all. He said, you can read my other posts for my background story, but as of today, the divorce that my wife filed for 15 months ago is officially withdrawn. She also came back to bed about a week ago. We are now starting our new marriage together. Well, it's just the way that's Matt described. That's like a new marriage.
A new phase. Things can, a new story here.
Matt continues. It's been a long road that started way more than 15 months ago, and certainly it's not over, but I am celebrating today. She's definitely being very cautious and taking things very slow, but I feel all the hard work I have done is paying off. The things we are taught about patience, standing our ground, being kind, living how we want to live, pull versus push, and more have all been very useful to me. And of course, a little prayer helps too, Matt shares. Our work will never end, and I hope we can build an even stronger marriage than we had before.
Oh, congratulations, Matt. And that's great.
So we actually put this question out there to the Facebook group a little while back. We were asking, okay, what are some of those emotional reasons that prevent a spouse from coming back? I think, part of the reason why we were wanting to touch on this is I think a lot of us look at those logical reasons. Well, they say, well, my husband or wife should come back because we have kids, or it doesn't make sense.
Right. It's not logical.
Yeah.
I get that.
They'll give a lot of logical reasons why whether someone should or should not come back. But I think we've talked about
this. Because we think that we're logical human beings, when if you study marketing, every person that's into marketing will tell you it's only about the emotion. You try to create emotional responses. So I believe that that's right. We are also so emotional that we have to touch on that a bunch when trying to fix relationships.
So when we asked the question, we were saying, okay, well, what are those emotional reasons for not coming back? And right at the top.
All right. It says fear of being hurt again. That was a big one with 32%.
We actually do touch on that a little bit today.
Then they drop down to about below 13%, all the rest of them, and say smaller things: anger, apathy, no trust. Guilt is like 3%. So,
but we have, those are all like really good reasons. And I think I would agree with that very top one. I see that over and over and over and over again. It's this fear of being hurt. I think a lot of that might come from like these attempts at repair that don't quite actually go as far as they need to.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, like I said, we want to go over some of these reasons and some of our thoughts on some of these emotional reasons. We're going to dive into that, and then, like I said, we're going to get into these solutions. Why don't we talk about some of these emotional reasons that your partner might be staying away?
Okay.
Why don't we actually start with that top one?
The top one, the fear of being hurt. It is hard when you get triggered and you're hurt, and then these things keep coming up that remind you of the hurt, that maybe aren't hurting you, but they remind you of the hurt. So I really get that one. I feel like that's a human thing. We can all relate to that to some extent here.
I think it has a lot to do with feeling unheard or disrespected or without a voice or powerless. A lot of those sort of things. And I think a lot of it has to do as well with, you know, over time, a lot of this feeling unheard and disrespected, a lot of that being without a voice is just, it keeps happening over and over again. And there's a lot of promises that things will be better and not a lot of hope that things that it could actually change. I actually think another like top thing that someone had mentioned in the poll was that idea. I think I can see that her name is Sherry added that item, saying loss of hope is a big one, and all the others just mask that reason.
And I think they may have tried things before and it just didn't work, because maybe there could be lots of reasons that it didn't work when you tried something. It could be just how long you stuck with it. Mm-hmm. And it could be because the other person wasn't committed when they said that they would try again. So there's lots of reasons why, you don't want to try again.
Well, I actually recall speaking with someone just the other day where this was especially poignant and especially applicable because they had attempted some therapy. They had attempted couples therapy previously. And, his own comment was, I don't think we went far enough. So there was some amount of things that were okay.
Yeah.
But they didn't actually address all the underlying issues. And that's always like a concern of mine is like, if you solve the surface level problems, but not what's underneath, then you're going to get these sort of situations.
Right. Would it be helpful to share an example of what a surface thing is versus something deeper, perhaps?
So in this, without sharing too much information, there was some infidelity going on in that relationship. And so they started going to counseling. It makes sense to try and solve that. And it makes sense to even kind of point fingers at the person who was unfaithful. And yet part of the problem was they didn't address why this person was unfaithful. Mm-hmm. A lot of the dissatisfaction, a lot of the sense of feeling rejected, a lot of the communication around problems. They just said, okay, let's stop the affair. And that's about where they stopped. And so because they didn't actually address why the affair happened, all that sense of rejection, the rejection continued. And then there was another affair. And they didn't have any ability to actually talk about it. So there was very little ability to fix things within the relationship.
Right. And that's what, makes you guys so different. And a lot of other, not to say that this program's the only one that does this, but it's good to look at why are things happening.
So we have other emotional reasons as well. Let's go on to the next
right. One. Apathy or sadness. So this means that you're feeling a loss of love and connection there. Maybe to the point where you're just you don't really care what the results are going to be. You're just whatever. I think I'm emotionally burnt out.
And I think where this is coming from is when, I don't know if you would agree with this, but where the relationship stops being prioritized.
Yeah.
It's more like there are bids for attention that repeatedly get unmet, or once again, or the relationship doesn't get prioritized. And so there's not really anything interesting or rewarding within the relationship. And this is the result.
Right. So there's not a lot anchoring you emotionally together anymore.
Well, and, there often is, why relationships persist through this sometimes is, and I liked your comment there, a lot of times there's these structural anchors, such as children and the length of the relationship.
Yeah, shared assets. Yeah.
Religious values. And these are these structural commitments, but when you don't have that personal emotional commitment.
So it helps that any aspect of your relationship is okay, even if the overall relationship is struggling, if you still have fun together. These are huge wins. This is an anchor, an emotional anchor you can connect into still while trying to work things out.
Okay, and if we go on, there's further ones. We have anger and resentment. And I know we're saying here are these broad emotions, but the kind of the point here I'm why we're sharing these things is I'm pointing this out and pointing where it comes from so that you can have some understanding of where your partner might be coming from. And we're going to get a little bit into this in the solutions, like what do we do about this? But having some understanding of what is going on and not just my partner is leaving and it's because they found someone else. There's a lot more underneath it, or they're leaving and they just want their freedom. There's stuff underneath it that needs to be understood and to a certain extent validated, and for there to be some empathy for some of these feelings. So the last one that we were saying, not the last one, we're going with anger and resentment here. There's one more after this. A lot of times this is where, I don't know.
Is this the word where the word limerence comes into play when people are talking about this?
Well, anger and resentment.
Oh, I thought we were talking about excitement. Okay.
But anger and resentment, I think a lot of times come from a sense of being wronged, that something has offended the other person. Sometimes this can be about feeling controlled, but this is a lot of, I would say, I want your opinion. Is this about unresolved pain or unaddressed pain?
This anger and resentment about feeling controlled
specifically? No, not about feeling controlled. It's just in general, where does this come from? If there's a lot of anger, if there's a lot of resentment, is this about...
It could be a few things. It could be like there's a very dominating personality in the relationship, for good or for bad. Like some people are just they put themselves out there easier, and maybe the person that doesn't feel as like able to speak up for themselves could feel like, hey, I'm never being heard. When they're never feeling heard and the other person that speaks up a lot is getting their needs met, it could feel like you are being controlled without it really being that. Sometimes it is.
I'm going to put that still, even your example, under the category of unresolved pain of some sort.
Okay.
And so I think, in my opinion, if there's anger or resentment, what I consider resentment is ongoing anger. It is a lot about some sort of wrong that is unaddressed for a good period of time. And it's important, like I said a moment ago, like understanding where this is coming from so that we can kind of touch on some of these reasons as you're trying to repair. So like in this example, if we see a lot of anger and resentment and we're understanding it's probably coming from some unresolved pain, well, you need to look at what's been painful and actually, do something about it perhaps, or, validate it or have some empathy for that pain.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a very understandable one.
And the last one here, which sounds odd, but the last emotional reason that we're just going to cover today, and I don't think this is going to be a comprehensive or exhaustive list, but is the feeling of excitement.
Yeah, so the loss of it in your current relationship and maybe that you found it somewhere else.
I know when we discuss things, you talk, there's a lot of talk about needing things to feel exciting.
And some personalities just need that. It feels like they have to have something to look forward to. So when things feel like drudgery, that can be really hard for some people. And there's ways to create that, but like some people might not be able to see how they could create that in their current circumstances, and that's the problem there.
I do think a lot of if this is like that emotional reason for stepping away, I think excitement is coming from other options that are suddenly presented. And this might be another partner.
It doesn't have to be always, though. Exactly. It could be like what people call the midlife crisis, like, oh, I'm going to buy their sports car or I'm going to go and travel the world now. I've always wanted to. And they're like, but you've never wanted me to. Like, it's that kind of.
Yeah. I've heard other situations of like, I want my freedom. I want some ability to live my dreams. I mean, these are very vague sort of things. It might be something specific, like Jen was mentioning, like the sports car, or I'm going to be a nomad or gypsy, and I'm going to just travel around in my station wagon and live out of my station wagon.
Right. And follow the stars, whatever that means. So the thing is, maybe, and this is like, I can be prone to needing excitement, so I can speak to this a little bit. What I'm thinking here is somebody that feels like there's no excitement might see a lot of requests at home that don't feel good. And that might be like, oh no, I can't live my life. There's too many issues, problems that have to be addressed. And it might not be your fault. It could be a child with special needs. It could be a older family member that needs care for. Like, some things might happen that make it feel like, oh no, I'm trapped. I can't escape my circumstances unless I leave and find the excitement elsewhere. And while that's really hard, I do see when people have that need, that's what happens sometimes.
I mean, I've even seen it under the almost like the weight of practicality, as in, no, you can't go to a class to learn about juggling. It's going to cost money, and who's going to watch the kids at home? And like,
it could be a lesser form of this too.
Exactly. But enough of that. You can't go and do these exciting things, these dreams of yours.
Your dreams are not important.
Because of practicality. It might make sense to you. Okay, we don't have space in there, but it's enough of those walls. It's enough of those limitations that tend to create this situation where the other person says, I can't be here anymore, and I need to leave in order to live my dreams.
There's too many obstacles to feeling excitement or dreams.
Yes. Yeah. So we have that understanding, the emotional reasons, the underlying reasons here. And we did say that we wanted to get to some solutions. Like last week, we were discussing logical reasons. I think the truth here, though, is ultimately all reasons for leaving
end up being emotional, yes. Or start being emotional and then become logical.
I think you said it just a little bit ago. Like, essentially, we all like to think that we're logical people.
Oh, even the most logical people I know that say, this is completely logical. No, it's not.
So even though, like, we went over these logical reasons, these are the outward reasons that a lot of people are going to explicitly say. But I do think that underneath it all, there are these emotional reasons that we have mentioned. And maybe there's like a more nuanced or subtle or just a slight variation on that. But I want all of you to pay attention to that principle and think, okay, if my partner is pulling away, what is that emotional reason?
Mm-hmm.
We discussed several, and maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something just slightly different. Like we when we did the poll, you guys all gave a few other reasons, like guilt, pride, and ego. I didn't really talk much about pride and ego, but I do think that is there. Jen and I, that I'm not going to say, hey, we're better people, but
I don't know.
Pride and ego is not a big issue for us.
I think pride and ego wouldn't be the dominant reason, but it might be a secondary reason. Like, sure. If you are fear of being hurt again. And so I feel like it would go with the other ones. Maybe it's not the lone wolf reason here.
But we did say we were going to talk about solutions.
Okay.
Right.
We like solutions.
Solutions. I don't know. I think that's why people actually listen to us at all. I like to think that we have some decent solutions. I don't know. I think some people say we have some good solutions here and there. I do want to give a disclaimer, though. Relationships are complicated, and we are giving you something to consider. That's what we're doing. We're giving you something to consider when seeking professional help for your specific case. I like to see these podcasts as giving some tools, giving some understanding, giving a good platform with which to start making things better. And
right. Some hope here. Hope is being infused.
But if you're in the situation where your partner is backing away and you really want to do something about it, please don't just use this podcast as your only means of figuring things out. Those sort of situations are complicated, and I do highly recommend professional help. If it's not with us, certainly be careful and choose someone else who is experienced in these sort of things. But anyways, I think I like to start off these sort of solutions with splitting into like two categories.
Okay.
I've discussed this with you, right? We've had this conversation.
Let's see here. I'm going to refer to the notes. Let's see.
Right here. It's when, first one is, and like I said, I want to split it into two because it really kind of dictates where you start with the whole process. But path number one is when there is little to no interest in making the marriage work. Let's say your partner is so angry and they say, I never want to see you again, and I don't want to talk to you, and I couldn't care less if you dropped off the face of the earth. Like those sort of situations. I mean, that's some extreme statements, but if there is zero interest in making the marriage work is category number one. Now, that might seem impossible, but there are some things that you can do from that situation. But the other category is,
I get you now. The other category is when they do want to work with you.
But
the partner believes there's too many obstacles in the way. So like, I do want to do something about it, but I don't know if this can work.
So like some examples of that would be like, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Yeah. Or I don't feel like we could find that love again. I don't feel like I could be in love with you again. Or, you've just hurt me too much. Mm-hmm. You had this affair and I just...
So there's some feedback. I feel like the difference between those is there's some feedback. The first one seems like they don't give you anything to work with. Mm-hmm. They're just out.
It's just like this blank wall. I don't want to do this. Yeah. Do not. That second one, I do hear fairly often. Yeah. It's more like we've tried solutions and we've tried and there's just nothing to be done.
And why would this one be any different? Yeah. Probably that also.
Very common sort of statements as people are backing off. Mm-hmm. So I do feel like each of these problems start in a different spot. So let's say that there's zero or very, very low interest. What should we consider?
Well, when there's low interest in fixing the marriage, this tells us that those nice, positive, flirty, fun parts of your marriage, have died off. They haven't been happening for a while now.
And I think that's a lot of what creates that situation. I would agree with you, as in there's no interest because now we have problems and there's nothing
emotionally anchoring us anymore.
Yes.
Like when we talked about that earlier. What's my emotional reason for sticking around?
And I feel like very much that that's why some of you might be hitting this hard wall when you jump in and say, okay, you're leaving. Why don't we work on the marriage? Why don't we fix things? And you just hit this super hard wall.
Right.
And it's because those fun parts, those nice parts, those pleasant parts haven't been present in enough time.
Yeah.
Low interest dictates that there's a much greater need to start with motivation.
Yeah. So even though that's sad and discouraging, at least you know where to start, is what we're saying.
And what I mean by that, it's going to be much more about why, working on the why. Why should we work on the marriage rather than let's work on the marriage?
So let's come up with reasons to, perhaps do something about this.
Well, and I even feel like it needs to step back from that, as in we can't even discuss, like, I know I just said this. I know I just said we need to work on why should we work on the marriage, but essentially what that means is the focus should be on simply being friendly again, making interactions more enjoyable, less tense, more interesting.
Right. Okay, I get that. Because now you're like, okay, at least things don't feel tense all the time or bad all the time. All right, maybe we can I believe we can have discussions, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. I feel like if it's gotten to that point where there's that hard wall, it's the idea of reconciliation is so repelling, and that sounds harsh, but it's just the idea of getting back together is a big turnoff. And so why is that? And, once again, it's like that you don't have those friendly interactions and they're not enjoyable. And so you need to work on those lesser goals, those goals that are a little bit more immediate right in front of you, without it being about getting back together.
Yeah, because that's too many steps to go.
I almost feel like this is kind of like the big obstacle,
right?
Is all these little attempts to make kind of something small better are held back because the motivation is suspect.
Right.
As in, is this, are you just being nice to hook you in, to hook the partner in?
Right. Is this genuine? Are these genuine emotions? Which everybody wants. Everyone wants to feel like there's genuine emotions between those they love.
Now, people like to have that logical side. And it is likely that you will need reasons to fix these parts of your relationship. And remember, those reasons can't be about getting back together, especially if your partner has no interest in the relationship. So what can be some logical reasons if we're trying to build this up?
So I like this idea a lot. So let's set some smaller, more immediate goals, such as let's lower the tension. Perhaps when we're together, can it be just like a little bit lighter, a little more like enjoyable? Are you able to take some deep breaths and relax at the end of the day together? Or having better co-parenting relationship. Can we like agree and like kind of like be good compatible parents? How about being able to feel comfortable around each other? Just like that's huge, so that our home can feel like an enjoyable place to be, even if we're not feeling it between us. Like, can the home feel like that, a place where we both belong? Or improving communication. Like, we're going to have to talk no matter what. We have these assets and these children together. So like, why not? And that's very motivating. I feel like that is a really good place to start, is some of these things here.
We have like a personal friend that's kind of going through this situation. And I think she would absolutely love if her soon-to-be ex would agree to any of those goals. And I think, a lot of people don't like sitting with the tension, the terrible co-parenting relationship, that lack of comfort and the sense of unease around each other. And these are much more reasonable goals to put out there, something that's a little bit more acceptable.
And while they feel small, think about how huge each one of them is in making your quality of life better. And so you're like, I want to help your quality of life be better. And so can we just like work on X or Y or Z? It'll help us both. It's a mutual goal.
And I think what we're getting at right now is the goal here is to get your partner to buy into any sort of improvement, some sort of improvement, and to get them to agree to like, yeah, you know what, maybe we can try to be a little bit less vindictive, a little bit better at communication. Think about how big of a deal that is. Like, you've taken that little step and you're using that to build up some trust and to build up some sense that things can be okay.
Yeah.
And just that idea, you want your partner buying into that idea.
And if we're talking about emotional reasons, this changes the emotional climate and makes it much, much, much more conducive to further steps.
So if there's very low interest because the anger is just intense, the fear of being hurt is very intense, you were looking for some sort of improvement that your partner can buy into.
Yeah.
So then the other category.
Too many obstacles. What should be considered here?
So when I think that there is a greater interest in the relationship, it's just that your partner simply doesn't believe that things could be better. I think that your main focus or foci should become primarily, I think, action. And action meaning like follow through and a lot of that.
We're not going to talk about things anymore. I'm just going to start taking steps to make things feel easier, better.
And I'm gonna say, like, even action in and of itself is not the deciding factor. It's actually action as a vehicle to build up trust. So
and it's consistent action.
Yeah.
When you have inconsistent action, you're like, I'm trying all the time. It still doesn't speak to that things could be better unless it's consistent.
So we're saying this because if this is the state here where there's interest, it's just there's too many things that are wrong. I believe that it's gotten to this point because there's been enough attempts at fixing things with not enough follow through. And so they're saying, I just like, there's too many things in the way. I got to back out for health reasons. I don't feel like you're going to actually consider all the hurt that's been caused.
Yeah.
And that's why you need to demonstrate that something's different. So it means like decisive action. It means very clear expectations. It means follow through, deliberate messaging. And I think this is where I think some people get caught up or they trip here a bit.
And I think this is where having the coach probably matters the most, because you might think that you're giving consistent messages, but like it's great to have a third party being like, actually, maybe tweak that because that doesn't sound like it's like giving the same message that you want it to give.
I was just, me and the other people at High Thrive, we meet on a regular basis to discuss client issues and give each other support and whatnot. And I just recall, even this week, we were discussing a case, and the client was like, I was saying, hey, it sounds like there needs to be some more empathy here, some more validation, some more understanding of the situation. And the other coach was like, oh, I think they told me that they've been trying that. And I said, okay, let's take a look at that. And he says, oh, great. I have some text messages that this person shared with me. And so we started looking into the text messages, and the attempts at empathy were terrible. I'm kind of saying that kind of jokingly, but essentially like what this person thought were attempts at empathy were basically like, hey, I understand you, but you're wrong. And that was over and over again, the attempts at empathy.
Yeah. And I think we all get blinded. So it's no fault of any one person. We all do this. We think that we're sending a certain message when maybe we're not. And I can even think of, as a very self-aware person, times when I think that I'm sending this message and it's not coming across. And so that's why I love, having a coach. And occasions I'll get one just to help me with like my consistency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jen and
messaging.
I sometimes need an outside perspective as well. That's just what's needed.
It's absolutely wonderful.
But yeah, what we're talking about here is when there are too many obstacles, is you do need that action that's consistent, that you are very conscious of the kind of message and narrative that you're building up, that there is very clear follow through. Like I said, it's all about building trust. And I don't think that everyone is 100% aware of specific things that they can do to build up trust. But, much like a low interest partner or very little or zero interest partner, if your partner has already started discussing concrete plans for leaving, you may need to avoid direct goals of fixing the relationship. This is kind of on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
There are many times, and I've seen other programs out there that say, okay, stand firm in your resolve to fix the marriage, and be very vocal about that. Say, I'm standing for the marriage. And in some cases, that's a good thing.
Right. But everybody's case is unique, and you have to look at the subtle emotions.
Yes. The point, though, is to get your partner to buy into cooperative goals, even here. Even if those goals are just you going about things on your own. And that's why, it's kind of needs to be on a case-by-case basis, because, maybe your partner really needs you to stand firm, needs that assurance. And that is part of these cooperative goals. I need assurance, so I'm going to stand firm in the marriage. But if your partner really isn't wanting or willing to work on things, you can't make that your goal.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're now being invalidating, you're being insensitive, you're being uncaring, you're being controlling, there's this labels or narrative.
Which you might not be doing, but they might internalize that's what's happening.
Exactly.
There's a distinction there.
We talk a lot about the narrative, and that's like the narrative that gets built up in those cases.
Right. So we're changing that.
So I hope this gives some perspective, some thought into how you might approach the situation if your partner is pulling away. And I know the kind of answers are a little bit vague, and that's because what we say at the beginning, relationships are complicated, right? And a lot of things do depend on various factors for how we go about these solutions. But this is some good. It's a good groundwork.
Right. I think this is self-contemplative work that you can do here next.
All right.
To figure out what's going on.
Should we talk about our marriage
Yes,
Mythbuster?
I like this one.
Please comment. If you guys feel like the marriage Mythbuster is a great thing, let us know. And if you feel like there's some myths that you would like us to go over, let us know. And if you think that it's not interesting at all, please let us know that as well. We always read the comments. We always like to look at what you guys are wanting to hear from us.
This one's a fun one because I feel like this idea is romanticized in movies and books. Mm-hmm. And the myth is there's one perfect person out there for me.
I think there's this almost converse idea as well that some Jen and I actually heard this when we were much younger. This kind of idea, the opposite, like any two determined people can make a marriage work.
And we can also say and here. This touches on the idea that a person needs to complete you. Mm. And so I'm going back to the perfect person myth. And so I feel like, sure, there's going to be somebody out there that you're going to click with that you just will love and that will work so well with your personality. You'll be like peanut butter and jelly, but you don't want to think about that person as somebody that needs to take away all your problems or be the missing piece. The you complete me aspect is kind of damaging to think about. I'm thinking about that one movie, I think it's Jerry Maguire, and people like to quote it because he's like, you complete me. And I'm like, no, you're complete unto yourself. And you're better when you're together because you're able to, enjoy somebody else that's also
I think I see
on self-completion.
This idea a lot when relationships are breaking apart and we see someone else who sparks some interest, because the idea gets put in place that, oh, that person is interesting to me and it feels so much better to be with that person. Maybe I married the wrong person and maybe I need to go over there. And we just know that the tendency is for problems that aren't resolved in primary marriage are just going to be taken over into subsequent relationships later on down the road. And it might not look like that at first. It just, a lot of the times what's going on is people are in those beginning stages and haven't opened up and haven't gotten to the same sort of depth of relationship for problems to even be allowed to happen yet.
Right. Or you're not in the situations where the problems would arise.
Mm-hmm. But it's that idea that, okay, here is someone that I am suddenly interested in, probably because they're the right one for me. And I feel like that's a very big myth. So we have these two opposing myths. Any two people that are willing to work on things can make it work. And I just need to find the right person to make it work. And I do actually feel like it's the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Right. There's probably a few people you can make this work with. But if you've already found someone, committed to them, you love them, why not have it be that person?
Well, and it's just where we're getting at, where's the healthy spot here is exactly like what Jen was saying. There are many people that others can work with, but also at the same time, you do have to go through the work.
The work will not disappear.
Almost always what the process is other people are attractive for a very specific reason. And then as the relationship gains depth, that same thing that was attractive, there's almost we've read about these shadow sides to those strengths.
Mm-hmm. I want to know. So someone that's, it's more like you have a shadow and a gift. It's two sides of the same coin. If you're a person that's I want to marry somebody that's has good work ethic, Then at the same time, they struggle with work-life balance. So like, that's what we mean. Like there will always be, people are dynamic. They're going to have the good with the bad. They're going to be like really sensitive and responsive, but then they're really sensitive. So like,
or they might be very fun and exciting and lively. And then you're going to find, once you have some more depth to the relationship, that they're not very responsible, or they're, really miss a lot of deadlines.
There's not a lot of organization there. So like, you gotta love and have some understanding for the things that draw you to the people, and maybe work. It doesn't mean that you can't work out the work-life balance if somebody is a workaholic, but there's a reason that you also admire them.
Okay. So that is our Marriage Mythbuster. I think we covered a lot today.
Yeah.
If you liked this, just let us know. We'd love to hear some of your comments, some of your feedback. Next week, we're going to share the reasons why married couples give up too soon in their marriage, and perhaps like some ways to avoid that pitfall within your own relationship. So please listen to us next time. And like I said, let us know what you would like to hear from us.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to The Thriving Marriage, your A to Z blueprint for not just surviving marriage, but thriving. Until next time, my friends, thrive on.